Maid panics when she sees necklace on Billionaire's son, and as she steps closer, something about the way he looks at her, the words he begins to say, and the meaning behind that familiar piece she thought was lost forever, forces her to completely freeze. Her breath catching in her throat, her hands shaking as she tries to understand how a child in a mansion full of silent rules could be wearing something that should belong to someone from a life she buried long ago. A life she never expected to see reflected back at her through the innocent eyes of a boy who doesn't even realize the weight of what he is holding, leaving her torn between running away, demanding answers, or finally facing the one truth. She has spent years trying not to remember, while the walls of the estate seem to listen. The staff pretend not to notice, and the family she works for watches. Everything without saying a word. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. In the quiet city of Fairfield, Connecticut, there stood a large mansion known by everyone as the Bennett Estate. It belonged to the Bennett family, one of the wealthiest families in the region. Inside that house lived William Bennett, a man known for his billions, but also for his silence. He barely spoke to anyone. After losing his wife during the birth of their son, William changed completely. He stopped smiling, stopped joining family dinners, and barely looked people in the eye. Now he lived with his 4-year-old son Noah and his own mother, Eleanor Bennett. Eleanor was a strict and serious woman who liked everything in order. She decided everything in the house, what time meals were served, what Noah should wear, and who was allowed to enter or leave. The staff followed her orders carefully. Even William didn't argue. The mansion looked beautiful from the outside, with its tall windows and perfect garden, but inside things were cold, quiet, and tense most of the time. The little boy, Noah, spent most of his days alone. He had no siblings, and his father rarely played with him or showed affection. William often sat in his office looking at papers or staring out the window without saying a word. He wasn't angry, just distant. Eleanor believed she was doing what was best for the boy. She created a fixed schedule for him, from breakfast to bedtime. Routine builds discipline, she always said. Noah had a nanny, but the woman followed Eleanor's rules so closely that she never let the boy be free. He was told when to talk, when to eat, and when to sleep. The mansion had many rooms, but Noah was not allowed to go everywhere. Certain doors stayed locked. "Not for children," Eleanor would say when he asked. Even though the house was full of people, maids, cooks, guards, there was very little laughter or conversation. Everyone spoke quietly, and no one dared to break the rules set by Eleanor. Among all the workers, there was one man who noticed everything but said nothing. Peter, the gardener, had worked for the family for many years. He was a quiet man, maybe in his 50s, with sun-wrinkled skin and kind eyes. Peter spent most of his time outside, taking care of the flowers, bushes, and trees, but his eyes were always watching. He noticed how Noah looked through the window, longing to run outside. He saw how William avoided the boy, staying hidden in his own world. He even noticed how Eleanor gave orders as if she owned everything, but Peter never said anything. He wasn't stupid. He knew the family's history and that asking too many questions could cost someone their job. Still, Peter felt something was off. Sometimes at night, he saw lights in empty rooms. Other times, he heard strange sounds echoing from the halls. The mansion had secrets and Peter knew it. But for now, he kept his mouth shut and did his job. Inside the house, Eleanor controlled everything like a general in command. She checked the cleaning schedules, reviewed the grocery deliveries, and even approved the clothes the maids wore. She believed that order meant respect. To her, feelings were distractions. When Noah cried, she didn't comfort him. Instead, she told the nanny, "He'll stop. Don't spoil him." William said nothing. He let his mother manage everything because he didn't have the strength to argue anymore. Since his wife died, he stopped caring about how the house was run. He used to be cheerful and full of energy, but now he was just a shadow of the man he once was. He spent his days reading or walking around the garden, not speaking to anyone. Even when Noah reached for his hand or asked to play, William would gently pull away. "Not now," he would say. Eleanor believed she was protecting both of them, but in truth, her rules were turning the house into a quiet, lonely place. Noah didn't understand why his home was different from others. He had no friends, and the only people he saw were adults, who always seemed busy. He tried to talk to the maids, but they smiled politely and returned to their tasks. He tried to follow Peter outside once, but Eleanor stopped him. "You'll get dirty," she said firmly. So Noah spent hours sitting by the window, hugging his toy bear and watching Peter in the garden. He loved watching the birds and the flowers. He wished he could chase butterflies or play with someone. Sometimes he asked questions like, "Why can't I go outside?" or "Where is Mommy?" But nobody ever answered the way he wanted. The nanny said his mother was an angel now, and Eleanor said, "Enough questions." So Noah stopped asking. But deep inside, he felt that something wasn't right. He felt that there was more to the house, more to his family, and more to his story. He just didn't know how to find it. Despite its beauty and elegance, the mansion was filled with silence. The walls were clean, the floors were shiny, and everything looked perfect, but it didn't feel like a home. The staff walked carefully, as if afraid to disturb something. Even laughter was rare. William barely left his room. Eleanor gave orders without emotion, and Noah wandered quietly through approved parts of the house. Behind locked doors and long hallways, the house held memories and stories that no one dared to speak of. Some said the west wing of the mansion had been closed since the day William's wife died. Others said they heard voices when no one was around. Peter continued to work in the garden, always watching, always thinking. He didn't talk much, but he noticed every detail. Something was hidden in that house, something important, but until the truth came out, everyone would continue playing their roles, pretending that silence meant peace. And so, life at the Bennett mansion went on, quiet, cold, and full of secrets. Grace Miller arrived at the Bennett mansion on a Monday morning. She stood at the front entrance with a small suitcase and a heavy heart. She had recently been hired as a maid after going through a long and strict interview led by Eleanor Bennett. Eleanor didn't smile once during the interview. She asked direct questions and paid attention to every small detail. How Grace spoke, how she stood, and how she responded to pressure. Grace, still grieving the recent death of her daughter Emma, did her best to remain calm. She needed the job. Being a widow and having no other family left, she was trying to rebuild her life from the ground up. The mansion looked big and beautiful, but cold and serious. After a short greeting, Eleanor gave her clear instructions. "You're here to work, not to make friends. Focus on your tasks. No distractions." Grace nodded quietly. William Bennett passed by in the hallway during her arrival, but didn't even glance at her. Grace was given a room in the east wing of the mansion, where the bedrooms of William and little Noah were located. Her room was small but clean, with simple furniture and a window that faced the garden. Eleanor walked her through her duties without any warmth. "Clean the rooms by 9 a.m. Do not enter areas without permission. Meals are served exactly at noon," she explained. Eleanor spoke fast and didn't wait to check if Grace understood everything. Grace took notes mentally and followed silently. She was used to hard work. Losing her daughter had changed her completely. The sadness never left her face, and she barely spoke unless necessary. On her first afternoon, while walking through the hallway with a basket of laundry, Grace saw a small figure standing near the door. It was Noah. He looked up at her with wide eyes and said nothing. Grace gave him a gentle smile. To her surprise, the boy walked closer and gave her a quick, shy hug. Grace stood still for a second, touched by the simple gesture. Noah didn't say anything after the hug. He just looked at her again, then turned and walked away slowly. Grace watched him go and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: connection. She didn't know why the boy hugged her, but it stayed in her mind for the rest of the day. From the window, Peter, the gardener, noticed the interaction. He paused for a moment, wiping his hands on a rag, and narrowed his eyes slightly. Peter didn't miss much, and he had seen many people come and go in that house, but something about Grace made him curious. She wasn't like the others. Most new employees tried hard to avoid Eleanor and followed rules like machines. Grace followed the rules too, but there was a quiet softness in how she moved and looked at people. That first hug between Grace and Noah was small, but it was different. It marked the start of something no one had planned. The next morning, Grace started her work early. She cleaned the hallway floors and dusted the corners of the tall ceilings. Eleanor checked her work and made no comments, which Grace took as a good sign. William walked past her again, just like the day before, saying nothing. He didn't even seem to notice she existed. That didn't surprise Grace's eyes. She had already sensed that William was closed off and distant. In the hallway, Grace saw Noah again. This time, he didn't hug her but waved a little. Grace smiled and said, "Good morning, Noah." He nodded and stayed quiet, holding a small toy in his hand. Grace didn't push for more. She went back to her work but noticed that Noah kept glancing at her. He seemed curious, maybe even a little hopeful. Grace remembered Emma. Her daughter had also been quiet around strangers. That memory hurt, but she held it in. Peter passed by with a wheelbarrow of trimmed branches and briefly nodded to Grace. She nodded back without speaking. As days passed, Grace followed her routine strictly. She cleaned, helped in the kitchen when needed, and avoided any trouble. Eleanor remained cold, giving short instructions and offering no praise. "You forgot a spot," she would say flatly, even if the room looked spotless. Grace never argued. She just fixed the issue and moved on. William still didn't speak to her, not even a hello. But Noah started to notice her more. One afternoon, Grace found a small drawing left outside her door. It showed a house, a stick-figure girl, and a stick-figure boy holding hands. There were no words, but Grace understood who it was from. The next time she saw Noah, she said softly, "Thank you for the picture." He smiled and looked down shyly. That was the longest interaction they had so far. From across the garden, Peter saw it happen. He didn't say anything, but he watched closely. Something quiet was building between Grace and the boy, something that didn't exist in that house before. Even though Eleanor tried to keep everything controlled and cold, Grace's presence started to change small things. The way Noah looked at her, the way Peter watched from a distance, and even the silence in the East Wing started to feel different. Grace didn't try to be anything other than what she was: quiet, respectful, and kind. She never crossed boundaries, but her calmness brought a new kind of energy. Noah began sitting in the hallway when she worked nearby, just to be close. Grace never told him to leave. Sometimes she would say simple things like, "I used to sing while cleaning," or "My daughter liked teddy bears too." Noah never answered, but he listened. William remained locked in his own world, and Eleanor stayed sharp and cold, but something subtle had begun to shift. Peter could feel it too. The way he looked at Grace changed, from curiosity to quiet approval. And all of this had started from a simple moment in the hallway, one small hug from a boy to a stranger. Grace didn't know what her future at the mansion would be. She didn't expect anything big. All she wanted was a chance to work and live in peace. But deep down, she could already feel that her arrival had made something change. That first hug from Noah had meant more than words could say. Grace hadn't touched anyone with kindness in so long. That simple hug, so pure and unexpected, had opened a door she didn't even know was still there. Peter, watching silently from the garden, understood more than he showed. He had seen many people come to the mansion, but none of them brought the kind of calmness Grace did. Eleanor still walked with her usual strict steps, and William still avoided everyone, but something quiet was building. No one spoke about it, no one even admitted it, but it was there, and everything had started the moment Grace met Noah in the hallway, smiled kindly at him, and received a shy, gentle hug in return. That small moment had changed everything. As the days passed, Noah began to follow Grace around the mansion more and more. Every morning, as soon as Grace started her chores, Noah would appear by her side. He asked her to tell him stories, asked if she could play with his toys, and often waited in the hallway just to walk with her. Grace tried to stay focused on her work, but it became harder each day. Noah called her by name now, smiling every time he saw her. "Grace, can you tell me another story?" he would say, tugging gently at her apron. Grace would smile softly and say, "Maybe after I finish folding these clothes, okay?" Noah's presence brought movement and sound to parts of the mansion that had always been silent. The staff noticed the change. Even Peter, who usually worked quietly in the garden, seemed to pay attention. Grace felt something growing, a bond she hadn't expected. She didn't look for it, but Noah's affection kept reaching her heart every day. Eleanor quickly noticed the growing closeness between Grace and Noah. She didn't like it. One morning, as Grace helped Noah tie his shoelaces, Eleanor appeared at the end of the hallway and called sharply, "Grace, in my office, now." Inside the office, Eleanor's voice was cold. "You're not here to play. Do not forget your position. That boy doesn't need another nanny," she said. Grace nodded quietly and left without arguing, but the conversation left her shaken. Later that day, William passed by and saw Noah sitting happily beside Grace while she sewed a torn pillow. William paused. He didn't speak, but kept watching. He hadn't seen Noah this peaceful in a long time. That evening, William told his mother, "Let them be, it's helping him." Eleanor's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Grace continued doing her job, but now tried to keep a bit more distance. Still, Noah didn't care. He kept looking for her, talking to her, and sitting nearby. His world was slowly changing, and so was Grace's. Grace began to feel torn inside. Every time Noah laughed, her heart warmed, but every time he hugged her, a pain followed. He reminded her of Emma. Emma had also been curious, gentle, and full of questions. Grace found herself remembering things she tried to forget. Emma's laughter, her drawings, the way she called her Mommy. Grace did not want to get too close, but she couldn't stop it. Noah trusted her. He looked at her not just as a maid, but as someone who cared. Grace didn't speak about her daughter to anyone in the mansion, not even to Peter, who often gave her kind looks. She focused on work, cleaned the rooms, followed the schedule, and tried to keep her emotions hidden. But inside, everything was moving. Each day, Noah became more important to her. Sometimes he held her hand without asking. Sometimes he sat beside her and just stayed quiet. Those moments were small, but for Grace, they felt heavy with memories and emotion. One rainy afternoon, the sky was grey, and the sound of water hitting the windows filled the mansion. Grace was carrying folded towels down the hallway when she heard Noah call from behind. "Mommy?" The word hit her like a stone. She stopped walking, turned slowly, and saw Noah standing there, holding his stuffed bear. He looked confused, as if he had said it without thinking. Grace froze, her eyes wide. She didn't answer. She simply walked away quickly and entered the small service room near the kitchen. Once inside, she put down the towels and covered her mouth with her hand as tears started falling. She couldn't hold it anymore. The word Mommy had opened the wound she fought so hard to keep closed. Her shoulders shook as she cried. She didn't care who heard her. She sat on the floor and let the pain come. The room was quiet except for her sobs, which she tried to muffle. She hadn't cried like that in a long time. A few minutes later, the door creaked open gently. Peter stood there, silent. He didn't ask questions. He didn't say anything. He just stepped inside slowly and closed the door behind him. He looked at Grace with calm eyes and waited. Grace wiped her face and whispered, "I'm sorry. I needed a minute." Peter nodded, still quiet. His presence didn't pressure her. She sat back against the wall and spoke softly. "My daughter's name was Emma. She passed away. Cancer. It was fast." Her voice cracked at the last word. Peter sat down on an old wooden chair near the door and kept looking at her. "You don't have to talk," he said. Grace gave a small, tired smile. "I know, but thank you." She didn't say more, and he didn't ask. That moment of silence between them said more than words. Peter didn't offer advice or pity. Just being there was enough. Grace felt a little lighter, even if the pain was still deep. For the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. After that day, something changed in the mansion. It was small, but noticeable. Grace still worked quietly, and Eleanor still kept a tight grip on everything, but the air didn't feel as heavy. Grace was more open with Noah, even if she tried to stay careful. Noah didn't repeat the word mommy, but he stayed close to her, as always. He didn't understand everything, but he felt safe around her. William noticed how Noah smiled more and seemed less afraid. He didn't say anything to Grace, but his silence no longer felt cold. It felt approving. Eleanor, however, became stricter. She watched everything Grace did and gave more orders than usual, trying to keep control. But it didn't change the fact that Grace's presence brought something new to the mansion. Her quiet care, her gentle responses, and even her sadness made the house feel more human. What began as a simple job was turning into something deeper, and it all became clear that rainy afternoon when one word, "Mommy," opened the door to everything Grace had been hiding. While cleaning the toy room in the afternoon, Grace was organizing a shelf full of boxes when she noticed Noah sitting on the floor with his toy cars. He seemed quiet, focused on something in his hands. As she got closer, she saw that he wasn't holding a toy. It was a necklace, a delicate chain with a small, heart-shaped pendant. Grace stopped what she was doing and stared at it. Her chest tightened. She moved slowly and knelt beside Noah, her eyes locked on the piece of jewelry. "Noah," she said gently, trying to keep her voice steady, "where did you get that necklace?" Noah looked up and smiled. "Grandma gave it to me," he said. "She said it belonged to my little sister." Grace blinked fast. "Your sister?" she repeated, barely able to speak. She reached out carefully and touched the pendant. Her fingers trembled. She recognized it. It was the necklace she had given to her daughter Emma at the hospital. Right before, everything changed. Grace felt her knees weaken. She sat on the carpet, staring at the necklace hanging from Noah's neck. She knew that piece well, every small detail, the tiny flower engraved in the middle, the soft pink tone of the heart, and even the thin crack on the clasp. She had noticed that crack the day she gave it to Emma, while holding her hand in that hospital room. That necklace was not a copy. It was the same one. Her voice shook as she asked again, "Noah, are you sure Eleanor gave this to you?" Noah nodded. "She said it was my sister's. She told me I should keep it because it's special." Grace didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mind was racing. Her stomach turned. She stood up slowly and told Noah she needed to finish her work. Then she walked out of the room without saying anything more. Her head hurt. Her heart beat fast. She needed answers, but she didn't even know where to begin. Something was very, very wrong. That evening, Grace sat alone in her small room. She had barely eaten dinner. Her hands were still shaking as she unlocked the small wooden box where she kept all her personal things. Carefully, she removed old photos, a baby sock, and a folded hospital bracelet with Emma's name. She searched for the small cloth pouch where the necklace had been stored. It wasn't there. She opened every drawer, checked every pocket, even the suitcase she had brought with her. Nothing. The necklace had disappeared the same day Emma was declared dead. Grace remembered placing it in the pouch before leaving the hospital. That was one of her last memories before her world collapsed. Now, years later, that same necklace was hanging from the neck of a boy in this mansion, given by Eleanor Bennett, who claimed it came from a granddaughter. But Eleanor had no other grandchild. Grace sat on the bed, holding the empty pouch, feeling her body go cold. She couldn't ignore the feeling growing inside her anymore. She couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Emma's face. She remembered holding her, kissing her forehead, and placing the necklace around her neck. She also remembered how quickly everything happened after that. The doctor said there was no more hope. The nurses rushed in. Then someone told her that Emma had passed. But Grace never saw her daughter's body. She was taken away too quickly. At the time, Grace was too broken, too full of grief to question anything. But now, that pain was turning into suspicion. Why did Eleanor have the necklace? Why would she give it to Noah and claim it came from a sister? Grace felt like the ground beneath her was shifting. That night, she sat by the window and waited for the sun. Her mind kept replaying every moment from the hospital. Every word, every detail. "Something is wrong," she whispered to herself. "Something is very wrong." She knew she needed to find out the truth. The next morning, Grace woke up determined. She dressed quickly and started her usual duties, but her focus had changed. Every time she saw Eleanor, she watched her more closely. Every word, every glance, every small gesture, Grace paid attention to all of it. Eleanor greeted her with the same cold tone as always, pretending everything was normal. But Grace no longer saw her the same way. She wondered what else Eleanor had hidden over the years. Was it possible? Could someone like Eleanor do something like that? Grace didn't want to believe it, but the necklace was real, and Noah had spoken the truth. He had no reason to lie. As Grace continued her cleaning in the dining room, she glanced through the open door and saw Eleanor speaking to one of the maids. She smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was careful, controlled. Grace lowered her eyes and kept cleaning, but her thoughts didn't stop. From that moment forward, she would no longer see Eleanor as just a strict old woman. Throughout the day, Grace kept replaying everything in her head. She remembered how Eleanor had treated her since the first day. Cold, strict, distant. But now Grace wondered if it wasn't just personality, it was control. Maybe Eleanor had done something terrible. Maybe she was hiding something. Grace continued her work, but her mind was somewhere else. She knew she needed to stay quiet for now. If she started asking too many questions too quickly, she might not get the answers she needed. She decided she would start slow, observing, listening. Noah was innocent. He didn't know what the necklace meant, but Grace did. And she couldn't pretend anymore. That necklace, the one she gave to Emma, had returned to her life through Noah, and that meant the truth wasn't buried. It was right here, inside the mansion. She looked around at the quiet halls, at the polished floors and heavy doors. Somewhere in this place, the answers were waiting, and everything had started when she saw that necklace. Grace couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. After seeing the necklace on Noah and hearing what he said about a sister, something inside her shifted. She was sure now. Something was wrong. She had to find the truth, but she needed to be careful. If she asked questions too directly, Eleanor could react badly. So Grace began her own quiet investigation. While doing her daily cleaning, she started paying attention to small things she hadn't noticed before. She watched Eleanor's routine closely, when she left her room, where she went and who she spoke to. Grace also began exploring areas of the mansion that were rarely used. One day, while dusting near the northern hallway, she found a door she had never seen open. It was locked, and none of the staff ever went near it. Grace tried the regular master keys, but none worked. Her heart raced. She didn't know what was behind it, but something told her it was important. That door wasn't just locked, it was hidden on purpose. Over the next few days, Grace kept checking that same hallway when no one was around. The locked door in the north wing began to take over her thoughts. Why was it always closed? Why had no one mentioned it? One afternoon, while watering the plants in the hallway as an excuse, she turned and saw Peter watching her from the garden door. He wasn't smiling, just observing. Later that evening, after most of the staff had gone to their rooms, Peter walked by the kitchen where Grace was finishing up. "You've been different lately," he said quietly. Grace hesitated, but then nodded. She didn't want to lie. "There's something I need to know," she whispered. Peter looked serious. "I've seen the locked door too," he said. That was all it took. Grace sat with him at the back porch and shared part of her story about Emma, the necklace, and how nothing made sense anymore. She didn't give full details, but Peter understood. "If you're looking for answers, I'll help," he said. Together, Grace and Peter formed a quiet plan. They knew they couldn't just break into the door or question Eleanor directly, so they started with her office. Peter had been working in the mansion long enough to know which keys Eleanor kept and where. He said, "There's a small metal box in her drawer. I've seen her open it before with a separate key." The next step was finding a way into the office when Eleanor wasn't there. Grace waited for the right moment. One morning, while Eleanor was in town for errands, Grace entered the office under the excuse of cleaning. Her hands were shaking, but she moved quickly. She found the drawer, and inside was the metal box Peter had mentioned. She didn't open it, just confirmed it existed and had a separate keyhole. That night, Grace told Peter, "We need that key," she said. Peter nodded, but neither of them had a plan yet. Still, they knew more than before. Slowly, they were getting closer. While waiting for another chance to check Eleanor's office, Grace decided to follow a different lead. She needed to go back to the hospital where Emma had been. She took a day off, pretending she had a personal appointment in the city. She wore plain clothes, took the first bus, and arrived at the hospital that had brought her so much pain. The building hadn't changed. She walked through the doors and went straight to the records department. "I'm looking for information on a patient," she said. "Emma Miller, 4 years ago." The woman behind the desk typed on her computer and frowned. "There's no record," she said. "Are you sure about the name?" Grace repeated the name and date again. Still nothing. She insisted, asked to speak to a supervisor. After a long wait, another employee came out and explained, "That file was removed from the system the week of the reported death. There's no digital or paper record, and no body was released to any family." Grace felt dizzy. This confirmed her worst fear. Grace sat on a bench outside the hospital, unable to move for several minutes. Her hands were cold, and her chest felt tight. She thought back to that horrible week. The shock, the grief, the confusion. She had been so broken that she didn't ask questions. She had trusted the staff, trusted the system. Now she saw how easily things could have been hidden. The necklace, the missing records, no body. It all added up. Emma was not dead. Grace didn't know how or why or who was involved, but she knew the truth now. Something terrible had happened, and someone had covered it up. She took the bus back to Fairfield in silence, staring out the window with a blank face. When she arrived back at the mansion, Peter was waiting near the back gate. He could tell by her expression. "You were right," Grace said. Peter didn't ask for details. He simply nodded. They were both sure now. The only question left was the one that haunted Grace. Where was Emma? The mansion felt different when Grace walked through it the next morning. She looked at everything with new eyes. Eleanor's cold voice, William's silence, the locked door, the staff that followed orders without question, all of it felt connected now. Grace couldn't pretend anymore. She wasn't just a maid. She was a mother looking for her daughter. She moved through the day pretending everything was normal, but her mind stayed focused. Peter and Grace met again in the greenhouse and talked in whispers. "The key," Grace said. "We need it soon." Peter said he would look for a way. They agreed not to rush. They had to be careful. Grace also kept a closer watch on Eleanor now. Every movement, every word, every strange look, it could all be a clue. There was no doubt anymore. Emma was alive, and someone in that mansion knew the truth. Grace would not stop. She would keep searching, keep digging, and keep watching, because now her suspicion had become certainty. Emma wasn't gone. She was somewhere. Peter managed to get a copy of the key to the basement in the north wing. He didn't say how, only that it had taken days of waiting, watching, and choosing the right moment. Grace didn't ask too many questions. She just held the key in her hand and stared at it. They agreed to go early in the morning before the rest of the staff started moving around. When the house was still quiet, they met at the end of the hallway near the locked door. Grace's hands were shaking. Peter gave a small nod. She inserted the key, turned it slowly, and the old lock clicked. The door opened with a creak, revealing stairs going down into the dark. They grabbed a flashlight and stepped carefully. The air was cold and smelled damp. They reached a basement corridor with stone walls, and at the very end was a door. Peter opened it. Inside, they saw a small room. It was clean, organized, and looked almost like a child's bedroom. The room was strange. It wasn't dirty or abandoned. It was carefully arranged. There were expensive toys on shelves, stacks of books, and a small table with drawing paper and crayons. In the center of the room stood a young girl. She had clear, light eyes, and her light brown hair was tied back neatly. She didn't speak. She didn't run or cry. She simply stared at Grace with a still expression. Grace froze in place. Her legs felt weak. She fell to her knees. Her eyes filled with tears, and she whispered, "Emma?" The girl tilted her head slightly but didn't answer. Grace began to cry softly. She couldn't believe it. Her daughter, right in front of her, alive. Peter stood at the doorway, stunned. He slowly closed the door behind them. The room was silent except for Grace's soft sobs. Emma stood still, watching her. Years had passed, but Grace knew those eyes. It was her daughter. No one had told her. No one had given her a chance to know. They stayed in the room for several minutes. Grace didn't rush to hug Emma. She could see the girl didn't know her. Emma didn't seem scared, but she wasn't used to people. She looked at Grace as if trying to figure out who she was. Grace kept her voice calm. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here. I'm your mom," she said gently. Emma blinked slowly, but said nothing. Grace looked around the room again. There were cameras on the walls, a small bathroom in the corner, and a cabinet full of children's clothes. Peter walked further inside and picked up one of the books. "These are new," he said. Everything in the room was well maintained, as if someone came regularly to care for it. But it was still a prison. No windows, no sunlight, no doors to the outside. Emma had been raised here, in isolation. Grace looked back at her daughter and felt a mix of relief and anger. Emma was alive. But what kind of life had she been forced to live? Grace stood up slowly. Her face was pale and her hands were clenched. "We can't leave her here another second," she said to Peter. He nodded. "We need to be careful," he warned. "Eleanor will notice something's wrong if we move too fast." Grace agreed, but she couldn't stop shaking. Her mind raced. Who did this? Why? How could they take her baby and hide her like this for years? They returned Emma to her room and locked the door again so nothing would seem unusual. It broke Grace's heart, but she knew they needed a plan. That afternoon, Grace couldn't hold it in anymore. She went straight to Eleanor's private lounge and knocked hard. Eleanor opened the door with her usual stiff posture. "I know," Grace said, breathing hard. "I saw her." "I saw Emma." Eleanor didn't flinch. She stayed quiet for a second and then said coldly, "She's more mine than yours now." Grace's mouth fell open in shock. Peter stood nearby, tense. Then William walked into the room. William had heard the last part. He stepped into the room slowly, looking from Grace to Eleanor. "What's going on?" he asked, confused but serious. Grace turned to him, her voice shaky. "Your mother took my daughter, Emma. She's alive. She's been locked downstairs all these years." William looked at Eleanor. "Is this true?" he asked. Eleanor didn't deny it. She looked at him and said, "I did what was necessary. That child needed structure, protection. Grace was a mess back then. She didn't deserve another chance." William seemed frozen. He looked lost, trying to process everything. "You kept a child in the basement?" he whispered. Eleanor lifted her chin. "I gave her a life, a better one than Grace ever could." Grace stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "She's my daughter. You had no right." Peter remained in the doorway, silent but alert. The room was filled with tension. William had no words. For the first time, the truth was out, and it couldn't be hidden again. No one spoke for several seconds. Grace stood there, shaking but firm. William looked completely stunned, like the floor had dropped beneath him. He turned to Eleanor again. "How long?" he asked. "Since the hospital," she answered without emotion. "I made arrangements. She was never declared to the state. The records were erased." Grace gasped. William stepped back. "You stole a child," he said. "You stole her life." Eleanor crossed her arms. "I saved her." Grace took a deep breath. "You didn't save her. You locked her away." William didn't defend his mother. He didn't say anything. He looked at Grace. "We'll fix this," he said quietly. She nodded, still trembling. The truth had finally come out, but the pain was only beginning. Emma had lived in silence for years. Grace had been made to grieve a child who was never dead. Peter placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. "We need to get her out," he said. Grace looked him in the eye. "We will," she said. "We're taking her back." The words didn't make sense to him at first. He looked at his mother, waiting for her to explain that it was all some kind of misunderstanding, but she didn't. Eleanor stood calmly, as if she had nothing to hide. Grace kept repeating, "Emma is alive. I saw her." "You have to believe me." William shook his head. "This isn't possible," he said softly, almost to himself. Eleanor then said, "She was abandoned. I saved her from a broken life." Grace stepped forward, holding old documents, Emma's birth certificate, hospital files, and even pictures, but William didn't look. He turned away. "I can't deal with this now," he said. Then without warning, he pointed at Peter. "You leave. I don't want to see you here again." Peter opened his mouth to argue, but didn't. William then looked at Grace. "You're on leave. Don't come back until I say so." Grace was stunned. The next morning, Grace returned to the mansion, hoping it had all been a bad dream, but the guards stopped her at the gate. "Mr. Bennett gave clear instructions," one of them said. "You're not allowed in." She pleaded with them, asking just to see Emma, even for a moment, but they refused. Grace stood there for a long time before finally walking away, her eyes filled with tears. Back inside the house, Emma had been returned to the locked room. The cameras were turned back on, and Eleanor gave orders to the staff not to speak about anything. William stayed in his office for hours every day, avoiding everyone. He didn't speak to Eleanor. He didn't mention Emma. It was as if he had shut the entire situation out of his mind. Grace, however, refused to give up. She spent the next few days thinking of what she could do. She needed proof that couldn't be ignored, something undeniable. That's when an idea came to her: DNA. Grace remembered that Noah's hairbrush was still in her old room. She had cleaned his room so often that she knew exactly where it was kept. The brush had his hair on it. If she could get it, she could do a DNA test. She waited until evening, when she knew one of the younger housekeepers whom she trusted would be finishing her shift. Grace approached her outside the property and explained the situation in a low voice. The girl hesitated, but agreed to help. That same night, Grace received a sealed plastic bag with the hairbrush inside. She carefully removed a few strands and sent them to a private DNA lab with express service. Meanwhile, Peter, even after being kicked out, contacted an old friend from his younger days, someone who worked in legal investigations. He explained everything. "She needs help, real help," he said. His friend promised to guide them through the right steps. Grace felt a spark of hope again. It wasn't much, but it was something. While waiting for the DNA results, Grace spent her time collecting every document she had. She printed photos, made copies of hospital reports, and wrote down everything she remembered from the day Emma was taken from her at the hospital. Each memory was painful but necessary. She needed to show the truth, not just to William, but to the authorities. Peter stayed in close contact, sharing updates from his friend. "Once you have the DNA report, we'll be ready," he said. Grace nodded. She also searched for lawyers and finally found one willing to listen. The lawyer, a serious woman named Marta, took one look at Grace's papers and said, "This is enough to start a case, but the DNA result will make it undeniable." Grace left Marta's office feeling both nervous and determined. She knew Eleanor wouldn't go down without a fight, and William had turned his back on her. But the truth was on her side. Now, she just needed proof that no one could ignore or deny. After 5 days, the DNA lab called her. The test was complete. Noah and Emma shared a sibling match. The results were clear. They had the same biological mother. Grace's hands shook as she held the printed report. This was it. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just felt firm, focused. That same day, she returned to Marta's office and handed her the results. "Let's begin," she said. Marta began drafting the formal complaint. She included every piece of evidence: photos of Emma in the room, the DNA results, missing hospital records, and the testimony Grace had prepared. Peter also wrote a signed statement about what he had seen. The report would be submitted to both the police and child protection services. Marta said, "Once it's filed, they'll have to investigate." Grace nodded again. She was exhausted, but she was not afraid. For the first time, she felt that Emma could be safe again. This wasn't just a fight for custody. It was a fight to expose everything Eleanor had done. By the end of the week, the complaint was officially submitted. Copies were sent to the local child protection office, the police department, and to the court. Grace sat in Marta's office, watching her lawyer seal the envelope. "Now we wait for the response," Marta explained. "But with the documents and the DNA, they'll take it seriously." Grace looked down at her hands, still shaking slightly. She thought about Emma, still trapped, still waiting. She didn't know how long it would take, but she had done everything she could. Peter called later that night. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Now it's out of their hands." Grace replied, "She's my daughter. I couldn't let this end like it did." Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Eleanor acted like nothing had happened. William stayed silent, locked in his own confusion and guilt. But change was coming. The silence, the secrets, the lies. Everything was about to come out. Grace had started something that couldn't be stopped. And now, the truth was finally in motion. The DNA test results were finally in. The paper confirmed what Grace already knew in her heart. Emma and Noah were siblings from the same mother. The report clearly showed the match. No doubts, no errors. Grace sat in silence for a moment, holding the printed result with both hands. Her heart was beating fast, but not from fear. It was relief. Proof. Real proof. She took the paper and went straight to Marta's office, her lawyer. Marta reviewed the document with serious eyes and gave a firm nod. "This is it. This will be enough," she said. That same day, Marta contacted the Child Protection Department and forwarded all documents, including photos, Emma's old hospital files, and the DNA match. Within hours, the case was moved forward. The authorities acted quickly. The judge approved a warrant. The next morning, 2 black police cars pulled up in front of the Bennett mansion. Officers stepped out showing badges and papers. Grace was there too, standing behind them, ready for what would come next. The officers didn't wait. They entered the mansion with legal documents in hand. Eleanor was in the sitting room when they arrived. She stood up immediately, demanding to know what was happening. One of the lead officers spoke calmly. "We have a court order to remove a minor being held in illegal custody." Eleanor tried to block their path. "This is my home. You can't just walk in here," she shouted. But they moved past her. Grace followed the officers directly to the north wing. She guided them to the locked basement door. The key was already in her hand. When she turned it, her fingers trembled. They went downstairs, and as soon as they opened the hidden room, Emma looked up. She didn't cry, but her eyes showed confusion. One of the female officers knelt down and gently explained, "It's okay, sweetie. You're safe now." Emma didn't move at first. Grace stepped forward. "Emma, it's me, Mommy." Slowly, Emma walked into her mother's arms. Grace held her tightly. Eleanor followed them, shouting orders and threats. "She's mine. I raised her." "That woman left her to die." But her words didn't stop the officers. One of them approached her and calmly said, "Ma'am, you're under arrest for child abduction, illegal confinement, document forgery, and psychological abuse." Eleanor's face turned pale. "I did what was best for her," she muttered, trying to remain calm. The officer didn't respond. They handcuffed her gently but firmly. As they led her out of the mansion, reporters had already started to gather at the front gate. News of the operation had spread fast. Cameras flashed and voices shouted questions. Eleanor kept her head down. Inside the house, William stood frozen in the hallway. An officer handed him a sealed envelope. "This contains the full report, sir," he said. William took it but didn't open it. He sat down slowly on the staircase, holding the envelope in his lap, unable to speak. His entire world had just collapsed, and he knew he had allowed it. After the officers left with Eleanor and Emma, the mansion fell completely silent. William sat in the same spot for a long time. When Grace walked back in with Emma in her arms, William stood up. His face was red and wet with tears. He looked at Grace and said, "I'm sorry. I should have believed you. I should have seen it." Grace didn't answer immediately. She just nodded and held Emma closer. William took a deep breath. "I was afraid. I didn't want to believe my mother was capable of something like this, but I was wrong." His voice cracked. "I'll carry that shame forever." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "All I ever wanted was my daughter back," she said softly. William reached out to touch Emma's hand. "She's beautiful," he whispered, "just like you said." Emma looked at him curiously but didn't say anything. Grace turned to leave. There was nothing else to say. William watched them walk toward the door, knowing that everything had changed, for all of them. The legal process moved fast. With undeniable evidence, the court wasted no time. Eleanor Bennett was formally charged and indicted. Her crimes were listed clearly: child abduction, illegal imprisonment, falsification of official documents, and prolonged psychological abuse of a minor. Her trial was scheduled within days, and while she waited, she remained in custody. Grace was granted full legal custody of Emma. Child Protection Services reviewed the case and confirmed Grace's identity as the biological mother. Emma was examined by a medical team and found to be in good health. although emotionally distant from normal social behavior. The doctors said she would need time and therapy, but she could recover. Grace agreed to follow every recommendation. She held Emma's hand through every meeting, every form, and every evaluation. She promised her daughter silently that she would never let anyone take her again. The law had done its part, but Grace knew her real work was just beginning. Emma had come home, but healing would take time. The entire town was shocked. In just a few days, the Bennett family, once admired for their wealth and influence, became the center of the biggest scandal the town had ever seen. Newspapers printed the story on the front page. "Elite family involved in secret child confinement," one headline read. News channels aired interviews, and social media exploded with opinions. People were outraged. Some refused to believe it. Others said they had always felt something was strange about Eleanor. But one thing was clear. No one had expected this. Grace avoided the press. She stayed in her small apartment with Emma, keeping things quiet. Peter visited often, bringing food, toys, and helping whenever he could. William never appeared publicly again. He stayed inside the mansion, away from the noise. Grace didn't care about the fame or attention. All that mattered was that Emma was safe. She tucked her daughter into bed every night now, whispering, "You're home." The nightmare was over. The truth had won, and nothing could take Emma away again. With Eleanor in prison and the legal storm beginning to settle, William took a step that surprised everyone. He temporarily transferred full custody of Noah to Grace. It wasn't a decision he made quickly, but after everything that had happened, he realized she was the only one who had truly protected both children. "He's safe with you," William said during a quiet conversation at the mansion. "I need time to rebuild myself. I can't be the father he needs right now." Grace was hesitant at first, but she agreed. She promised to keep William informed about everything. The children's routine slowly adjusted. Noah adapted well, and being with Grace made him calmer. Emma still needed time, but being near Noah helped. Their bond grew stronger each day. Grace balanced care for both children while managing her emotions. She had won a painful fight, but now came the hard part, helping two young hearts feel whole again. William kept his distance, visiting from time to time, but letting Grace lead the way. Peter was also invited back to the mansion, not as a gardener this time, but as property manager. William trusted him completely now, and Peter accepted the offer, knowing he could help make real changes. The mansion, which had once been cold and full of secrets, began to transform. Rooms were cleaned out, walls repainted, and the north wing was no longer locked. William gave the order to build a new children's wing full of light, color, and open space. It included playrooms, a reading corner, and therapy spaces. "This house needs to breathe again," Peter told one of the workers. He supervised every detail, making sure it felt like a place of life, not control. Emma and Noah visited sometimes while the construction went on. Emma was quiet, but curious. She would touch the new furniture and watch the painters from a safe distance. It was all part of a slow recovery. No one rushed her. Everything was done with care, focused on giving the children a sense of safety and trust again. Emma was enrolled in weekly psychological therapy with a specialist who had experience in child trauma. The sessions were private, gentle, and built slowly over time. At first, Emma barely spoke. She would sit silently or draw pictures. Grace attended every appointment and stayed in the waiting room, reading or just being nearby. Over the weeks, Emma began to open up, first with small nods, then whispers, and eventually short sentences. The psychologist taught Grace how to reinforce positive responses at home. Every time Emma called her mommy, Grace smiled but never pushed. One day, after a long walk in the park, Emma reached out and held Grace's hand without being asked. Grace looked down and smiled. That moment meant more than any word. Noah was also part of Emma's healing. He treated her like a true sister. He shared his toys, told her stories, and always waited for her before starting any game. Grace often found them sitting side by side, drawing together or laughing at silly jokes. With things slowly stabilizing, Grace decided to move out of the mansion. William helped her find a small, comfortable house not far from town. It was close enough for Noah and Emma to visit the mansion when needed, but far enough to give them space. Grace decorated the home herself, simple furniture, warm colors, and plenty of space for the children to play. She wanted it to feel different from everything they had known. William respected her decision. They kept in regular contact for the children's sake. He called often to check in and came by when invited. Their conversations were calm and mature. There was no anger between them, just a shared goal to give the kids a future. Grace appreciated that. She never imagined her life would turn out like this, but she accepted it. She was no longer just surviving. She was building something new, something stable. Emma and Noah adjusted well to the new routine, and the new house started to feel like a real home for all three of them. The mansion, once known in town as a place of wealth and strict rules, became a symbol of change. People who had once only whispered about the Bennets now spoke openly. The community, once silent, showed support for Grace in small and big ways. Neighbors brought meals, strangers sent kind letters, and parents invited her to speak at local meetings about courage and justice. One day, the mayor's office invited her to a public event and honored her with a Community Bravery Award. Grace stood on the small stage with Emma and Noah beside her. She didn't give a long speech, just a simple thank you and a reminder that truth always matters, no matter how long it takes. The applause was warm and real. It was the first time Grace smiled in public without hesitation. She had come a long way. She was no longer the woman carrying loss and doubt. She was a mother, a survivor, and now someone the town truly respected and admired. Finally, the government completed the legal process of restoring Emma's identity. Her birth certificate was corrected and all records were updated. She officially had her name back, Emma Miller. Grace held the document in her hands, tears filling her eyes. "Welcome home," she whispered to her daughter, handing her the paper. Emma didn't fully understand all the details, but she smiled and hugged her mother. That paper meant more than words. It meant justice had been done. Grace framed a copy and placed it in the hallway of their new house. It was a daily reminder of how far they had come. The darkness that once surrounded their lives was fading. The mansion no longer felt like a place of pain. It had become a place where healing started. Emma was smiling more, Noah was thriving, and Grace felt peace again. The past had left its mark, but it no longer controlled their future. They were finally free to move forward, with truth, love, and the life they all deserved. Months had passed, and life had finally calmed down. Grace and Emma were living in peace in their small house near town. The days were quiet, filled with small routines that brought comfort. Breakfast together, homework time, and walks in the afternoon. Emma had her own room now, decorated with soft colors and drawings she made herself. She was sleeping through the night, smiling more and speaking with more confidence each day. Grace saw the change and held on to it. It wasn't easy, but it was real. Noah visited regularly, spending part of the week with Grace and Emma and the other part with William. He called Grace Mom now, not because anyone asked him to, but because it felt natural. "You're my second mom," he said once with a smile. Grace hugged him tightly. The three of them, Grace, Emma, and Noah, had become a family in their own way. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. For Grace, peace didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant finally living without fear. Emma had started school 2 months earlier. At first, she was nervous. She didn't speak much, and everything was new. Grace walked her to the gate every morning, holding her hand and reminding her, "Just do your best." Slowly, Emma began to adjust. She sat in the front row, listened to her teacher, and observed the other children. After a few weeks, she started to talk during group activities. Then came the drawings. Emma would bring home colorful pages filled with trees, suns, and happy faces. "This is me," she said one afternoon, pointing to a girl holding hands with two others. "That's Noah." "That's you." Grace placed the picture on the fridge and smiled. Emma also started making friends. A girl named Clara invited her to sit at lunch, and soon they were laughing together during recess. Watching Emma build a life gave Grace strength. Every time she saw her daughter smile, she knew the fight had been worth it. Emma was getting her childhood back, one day at a time. William had changed too. The man who once hid in silence was now trying every day to rebuild what had been broken. He saw his children regularly, never missing a visit. He asked Noah about school, played board games with him, and even helped Emma with her reading. He didn't force anything. He simply showed up and stayed. One evening, during a quiet visit, William said to Grace, "I know I failed when it mattered most, but I won't disappear again." Grace looked at him and replied, "Just be here. That's enough." And he was. He supported Grace in every way he could, financially, legally, and emotionally. He never tried to take control, only to help. Grace had earned the respect of everyone, including William. The townspeople, who once looked at her with suspicion or pity, now saw her differently. She was known for her strength and for what she had overcome. People greeted her with kindness, thanked her, and told her she had done what no one else dared. Peter remained an important part of their lives. Even after everything had settled, he visited the house often, helping fix things, dropping off groceries, or just sitting outside to chat with Grace. He had become more than a friend. He was family. Emma trusted him. She would sit beside him in the garden while he told simple stories or showed her how to plant flowers. Noah liked being around Peter too, asking questions and following him around. "You always know what to do," Noah told him one day. Peter chuckled and said, "I've had a lot of practice." Grace knew she could always count on him. He had been there when no one else had. Peter didn't like attention, but everyone in the family knew what he meant to them. Grace once told him, "You were the first person who believed me." He simply nodded. Their bond didn't need big words. It was built on loyalty and quiet actions, and it stayed strong, even when the rest of the world moved on. As for Eleanor, her story had taken a different turn. After the trial, she was found guilty and sentenced without appeal. The charges were serious, and the judge made it clear there would be no second chances. She was transferred to a high-security prison where she began serving her time. No visitors came, no lawyers filed for reconsideration. She remained alone, facing the consequences of her actions. Her name, once respected in the town, was now tied to shame. People stopped mentioning her in conversation, and the Bennett family did not defend her. William, though still processing everything, accepted that some things couldn't be forgiven. Grace never spoke of her in front of the children. For her, Eleanor was part of a closed chapter. The focus now was healing and protecting the future. Emma never asked about her, and Grace never offered details. The silence was enough. The justice system had spoken, and the past had been held accountable. That was all Grace needed to finally move forward. One object remained in Grace's care: Emma's red necklace. It was safely stored in a small wooden box in her bedroom. Grace had considered throwing it away once, but changed her mind. That necklace had once been a symbol of loss, then became the proof that led to truth. Now, it was a reminder of everything they had survived. On some nights, Grace would take it out and look at it, not with pain, but with peace. It marked the turning point, the beginning of the end, and then the start of a new life. Grace had come into the Bennett mansion as a quiet maid, just trying to survive. She had left as a mother who fought with everything she had. She didn't just recover her daughter, she restored her own strength, her name, and her peace. The house, the case, the past. It no longer defined her. Grace had begun again, this time with no secrets, no fear, and no shame. She had finally found her place. She was home. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.